Okay, this is going to be kind of a short video. I may do many of these. It's just basically I'm going to title them something like the Cheap Bastard's Guide to Gaming the System and Getting Components and Parts for cheap or next to nothing. Basically, how to recover useful parts from equipment that no longer serves a purpose. So to start off, most people, something breaks or whatever, they just toss it. If you're going to be a cheap bastard and you want to build things and you need power supplies and whatever, you have to know where to, look for them. This was something I recovered from an old 10100 switch. It's a switching power supply, and it's rated at, it has a 12 volt output that's rated at 1 amp and a 5 volt output that's rated at 2.5 amps. And it's all self-contained. You could put this in a box and put terminals on it. You could use it to power an Arduino or who knows what. And this thing is, I don't even know how old. It's probably 15, 20 years old, and it works fine. This is the 24 volt power supply from the Linac Hoya Lift. It's also a battery charger, and I'm going to be mounting this in a box so I can charge the batteries in the Hoya Lift. I got this out of a cooler motor speed control board. It's a motor start relay, and it's rated at 10 amps, or 10 amps, yeah, at I think 250 volts. Works fine, has heavy duty contacts on the bottom and on the top. This is the shaded pole, I believe these are called shaded pole motors, but out of a small fan. It's 3 speeds, and I still have the control thing on it. I took it apart because the fan blades and the fan disintegrated from age, but the motor can be oiled and it works, and I can either put it in another fan or use it for something else. This is a transformer I got out of a UPS. If you get old UPSs, say the old APC backups, the ones in the metal cases, single battery ones have a transformer that would make an excellent high amperage 12 volt power supply, and the 2 battery ones make an excellent transformer for making either a 24 volt or I believe an 18 volt power supply. In fact, I've got a couple of them here in the shop. This one right here, we'll just pick this up and show you. This one puts out about 28 volts DC, and I use it with the Variac to power some old cordless equipment, cordless drills and such that I don't want to spend the money on batteries for, and it works fine. You just set the voltage on the Variac, and you get a certain voltage out. I've also got another power supply over here. This one's 18 volts and it's an old APC. It's been gutted and puts out, I believe, 18 volts. Something else you can get out of these old APC power supplies are 15 amp outlets. Some of them will have only one, some will have as many as 6 or 8. These I got from old servers and power supplies, and I don't even know what else. If you've got the old AT power supplies, you can pull these out. These are 10 or 12 amp. Let's see what that says. Yeah, 10 amps, 250 volts, 8 amps, 125. There are, you push them in and they go on, you push them again and they go off. However, if you operate on them and you remove a little catch inside, they become a momentary switch. They work really good for that. I pulled out this emergency stop switch from the that Linac, and it can handle 18 amps at 125 volts. So it can be used as an emergency disconnect. I think it even has, it has a voltage rating for DC of 2 amps and a voltage rating of 8 amps at 400 volts, so that's pretty useful. These came out of the APC UPSs. They range in size from 10 to 15 amps. Circuit breakers. But one of the things I was going to talk about here was that how to get parts that normally cost a large amount of money for almost nothing. Case in point, if you need a 15 amp rocker switch and you go to eBay, you're looking, depending on whether or not you order from China or somewhere closer, you're gonna pay somewhere between $2 and $11. The prices are all over the place. If you want a 10 or 15 amp circuit breaker, those prices can range from anywhere from $5 to $20 or more. Do you need a power cord for, say, an old, you've accidentally cut the cord on an old drill or a saw or something? Well, you can go down to the dollar store, or you can go to your Home Depot or someplace and buy a really cheap power strip, and you'll pay $4 or $5 at the most. I mean, that's what they go for on eBay, but I believe you can get them for even less than that at some dollar store. And what do you get out of it? Well, one, you get a power cord, which, if they actually aren't lying, is rated at 15 amps. You get a 15 amp switch, and you get a 15 amp circuit breaker, all for for $5. This one even includes some kind of filtering, which you could actually use in a project. Some of them contain, like this one has an LED, but some of them have neon lights. So for $3-4, you get approximately $20 to $30 worth of components. I mean, even you look at the individual parts in this. You've got a little cross the line or X or Y capacitor. You've got a fuse, and I don't know if that's a MOV or what, that disc. And like I said, you get a nice line cord. All of that for $3 or $4. And if you go to a Goodwill, you can get these sometimes for $1 or $2, and on half price day you can even get them for 50 cents to $1. And they have piles of them. So, you know, don't pass up things that you happen to see and you think are junk. I don't have a use for it yet. One of my Skill cordless drill, something in it shorted, and I've got this chuck, which could be adapted to do anything from making a small lathe to you could use it, I don't know, in a servo, who knows. And you got this really powerful motor. The Linux, I've kept the cases. I don't know what I'll use them for, and if I don't end up having a use for them in a couple of years, I may throw them out. The battery, this could be useful. I can put 2 small 12-volt batteries in it, possibly even one larger one, and it could make a small portable. You could turn this into a portable power supply. You could use it to power, charge USB stuff. Who knows? And I think that's about it that I can think of. I'm going to do more of these as I find things in my shop. If I may post them from time to time in between projects. But don't throw things out without thinking about them, looking at them, taking them apart, and seeing what's useful in them. If you're, there's nothing wrong with being frugal, and a lot of times this stuff, there's nothing wrong with it. How many times do you use the switch in one of these plug strips? Most people, they turn them on, throw them under a desk, and that's it. They never turn them off again. So the switch in them is hardly used. How many times have you blown a circuit breaker in one? Hardly at all. I've hardly ever blown one. The only thing you do have to come up with is a nut for this. It doesn't have a nut, but some of them do, especially the ones in UPSs. Another thing is old circuit boards. If you take apart, if you decide you don't want to use stuff, you can always use parts off of this. I mean, look at this thing. It's got a standard computer power cord socket. It has a switch. It has, and that switch is rated at I can't read it. It has a heat sink. It has Molex connectors. It has diodes, and these have really long leads so they can still be used. Chokes. There's a fuse. There's the X or Y capacitors. Those can be useful. You've got moves. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on here. I've used these heat sinks in other projects, and UPSs have very large ones. Even computer power supplies, especially servers and stuff. So, you know, don't throw away things without going through them. Here's some other things I've recovered. This is 20 amp wire that I pulled out of some conduit that was in the ground for my shed when I rewired it. The stuff's still good. You can use it for chassis wiring, or you know, any kind of electrical wiring that needs 20 amps. This is a cord from a canister vacuum, or an old vacuum cleaner. I think it's rated at probably about 8 or 10 amps. Can be used for any number of things. Here's an old sewing machine motor. You can use these to make yourself a wire spooler, which I'm going to have a video about making your own simple wire spooler. Here's this is from a previous video where I built a small generator, and I used the engine from a weed eater and the motor from a wheelchair. The motor starts the engine and then turns into a generator. It puts out 200 watts of DC power at 24 volts, approximately 8 amps, I think. There's the large Backups 1250 that I've added the connector so I can put external batteries on it. This thing has an enormous transformer in it, and you could probably get easily probably 30-40 amps out of this DC or AC at least 24 volts. I'd have to actually run it or test it to spec it. My can crusher that I'm still working on with once again another DC motor from a wheelchair. Besides building a can crusher, you could make a winch out of this or a hoist. In fact, I plan on doing that with another one. And once again, there's a transformer out of a 24 volt UPS that I use to power this. This is the heat sink, a heat sink I got from a surplus store for very cheap, but you can pull those out of old equipment. You want a sound system for your shed or your workshop? This is the stereo out of an Oldsmobile 88 from 1995. Works fine, sounds great. Here's a motor from out of an old vacuum, the same one I got that cord from. It's I may at some point turn this into a shop vac. Not sure, because I already have a shop vac. But the motor works fine, very high speed, and that thing pulls a lot of suction. Here are various tools that I have. This one I had to replace the power cord. I used an old computer power cord for that. The red tools are Skil, and as you can see, I've converted them to be corded, because I don't want to bother spending money on batteries for tools I barely use. There's a heat gun that I got from a Goodwill for very cheap. The power cord was mangled. I put a new one on it from a power supply. It's a 15 amp cord. If you watched my recent video of converting this to a simple crane, I got this for free. It was for my mother. When she passed away, my brother had it. He tried selling it. No one would buy it. So I took it. It had problems, and I fixed it up, and it works just fine. And just as I start recording, a airplane goes over. This is my stash of stuff. Basically, anytime I throw something away, if it has a transformer, I pull it out. If I can spec it, I do. And I oftentimes write which side has AC in. And this one came out of an old monochrome monitor. It puts out 30 volts DC. This is an old doorbell transformer. I don't know where this came from. This came out of a HP oscilloscope, and it puts out a range of voltages, some of them extremely high and dangerous. Here's a UPS transformer. Pulled that out of an APC UPS. I believe it puts out 24 volts. Here's another UPC or UPS that puts out either. Oh, I didn't notice that. We got two connectors here, and then we have a center tap. I need to test that one, see if it'll work in my power supply. What else have we got in here? These are from blown speakers. These are cabinets from blown speakers. Can be used for whatever you need a cabinet for. I have a pile of old cameras from a surveillance system that I someday will use. Old fans. These are great for projects. Up here we have a transformer that came out of an old stereo, a bunch of heat sinks that came out of old servers. This is a transformer that came out of it's an old hobby transformer for trains. Old old power supplies of odd sizes, really small ones out of an old E-machine. These came out of Dell 2950s. Great source for heat sinks and fans, especially high-speed fans. You know, don't discount those old parts.